All right, we are live. Dr.
Excellent.
Daniel Erichsen, sleep specialist. What's going on? Thanks for being on the show.
I'm very good. I've been looking forward to this. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Before you hopped on, there were some kids in the background. You got a full house and a big family.
Yeah, exactly. I got two an 8-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl, and then their cousins are here over the weekend, and their dog. So it's full house. Yeah,
What type of dog?
it's a mini dachshund. It's a small but ferocious variety.
Me, we're thinking about getting a dog, but it's we're both my wife and I, we're both working, and it's just not the greatest time. We don't want to neglect the dog. We want it to have a nice, loving home.
100%. Totally get it.
So people look like they're rolling in here, so we can just kind of jump to it. But Daniel, I was hoping to hear a little bit about your backgrounds, how you got into medicine, and where you're from, or maybe where you're from, and then how you got into medicine.
Yeah. I'll do the full bio in like a
Yeah.
minute and a half here. So I actually grew up in Sweden. Was where spent most of my life actually until I was like 29. My dad is actually Danish. My mom is Ethiopian, but we were living in Sweden. I grew up in Sweden. That's where I went to med school.
Yeah.
My dad is a doctor. My mom's a nurse. So kind of like I didn't question it much. So that's kind of like it was very natural for me to go into medicine. And then towards the end of med school, I had some friends who went over stateside and did their training, and they said, "Oh, medical training is really really good here." So I was motivated to do that. I loved kids, so I went. I eventually landed in Bronx, New York, where I did my pediatric residency, and then it was in my second year, I think. I had thought I was going to be something like a pediatric intensivist or ER doctor, something cool and intense like that. But I realized it was not for me. I could not work in the nights and the weekends. So I needed something else, but I wanted to do some kind of specialty. So a friend of mine, we were just grabbing a beer, and he just mentioned, "Oh, there's this is sleep fellowship." I was really, you can specialize in sleep. And I read about it. I thought this is really intriguing. I was really interested in like the core, like just the basic, like why do we sleep? What's the function of sleep and those type of things. That's what led me into sleep. And last thing here, I when I started practicing sleep, I realized that insomnia was a real big problem, and I got more and more interested in that. So that's where I'm kind of like that's really where my heart is at, is really with insomnia, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen some of your YouTube videos, and there's the insomnia insights. You have like 400 videos. Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably more than 400 episodes, and
Wow.
that specific one, they kind of insomnia insights, which are a little bit like more distilled pieces of information, are like, I think it's episode like 344 or something like that now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I was sharing with you before that I was reading your book, Why We Don't Sleep. And I wanted to start with this because I think it speaks to a lot of preconceived notions that people have, where, you need 8 hours of sleep. If you don't get 8 hours of sleep, your life is over, type of thing. And I was cringing as I was reading it, because I had said those things before, and I had told my patients that before, like, you need to sleep 8 hours. It's so important for you to sleep 8 hours. If you don't sleep 8 hours, then it's a big problem. And so I was reading your book, and at the end I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I was doing and I just didn't know. So I guess, could you kind of go into where did the 8 hours come from? Like, how did that become a thing, and is that accurate?
Absolutely. Just super briefly before that, the reason, to be honest with you, the reason I wrote the book was that there is so much misinformation, but specifically, actually, that there was this other book called Why We Sleep that got a lot of attention, and it's completely inaccurate, actually. but it portrays sleep as this, like, if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to die. That's basically like the gist of that book. And I was really upset, and I thought it was really unhelpful. So that's why I called it, why we don't sleep. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's where that came from. But going to the question, 8 hour, where does it come from? Really, that's a super interesting question, because when you start looking at the literature, okay, you look at okay, how much do people objectively sleep, and how much do people guess sleeping? And this has been studied very, very thoroughly in quite big studies. And if you ask random people how much they sleep, most people will say, oh, about 7 hours. But they don't actually know that. Most people are not very good at estimating. When you objectively test, if people have done it again many times, you see that most people sleep about 6 hours. 6 hours and 15 minutes, something like that is the average amount of sleep most people get. So then you naturally, you wonder, okay, so if people on average sleep 6 hours, why are we always told we need 8 hours? Where does that come from?
Right.
And I have no clue. I have no clue where that comes from. I have looked for the answer, and I can tell you this, that there are references that are 300 years old where they said the same thing. Like, I think 8 is just like a nice round number. It's like a third of 24. So I don't really know where it comes from.
Like the 8 cups of water. It's like, where did that
come from? Yeah, exactly. Something like that.
A random arbitrary thing we just pulled out of the sky, and then it just became code for whatever reason.
100%. And I think, and then you often hear also like 7 to 9 and other numbers, but I think at least one little glimmer of hope is that the National Sleep Foundation, which is one of these big non-for-profits, I know that in their latest recommendations, they now give a broader range, like 6 to 9 may be okay or something like that. I think we are shifting a little bit away from the 8 hour myth.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, you brought up the Why We Sleep book, and I feel so embarrassed. That's why I went and told people this. I was like, oh my God. But I jumped the gun, and I didn't actually look at the studies that they were using. And then when I did more homework, it's like observational, small sample size, like studies on rats, that aren't transferable to humans. So all of these issues with the study designs to start with. So I'm glad you wrote that that second book. It definitely helped with a mindset shift that was already kind of happening, but that brought me over the edge.
For anyone that's really interested in this particular topic, I want to say that there is a fantastic essay by Alexey, Alexey, Alexey Guzey, Guzey, where he goes over the first chapter of that book, Why We Sleep, and he completely just kills it. Like, there is so many errors, not only like problems with studies, there's actually omissions of important facts and et cetera. So if anybody interested, check that out.
Okay, well, I'm going to check that out after. So there are a bunch of different questions. I tried to work through these and get some common thread questions. Some of them relate to anxiety. Some of them relate to insomnia. Some of them relate to having pain and sleeping. You probably get a variety of those questions. Maybe the one that happened the most often was, how do I find a way to sleep if I'm having pain? I don't know if this is something that you particularly deal with. Is that something that people come to you with often?
Yeah, it's quite often that is the case, and it is most typically in the scenario of insomnia. Again, somebody has trouble sleeping, trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, and then you talk about, okay, why is that? And they I have a lot of pain, and that can be any pain, of course, back pain or arthritis, whatever it is, and then. And the key there becomes learning a little bit more. So if somebody tells you, well, I feel kind of have some pain when I go to bed, but then eventually I fall back asleep. I wake up and it's kind of painful, and then I'm up for a little bit. I fall back asleep, and then it's if you get a sense from the history that the only thing that is disrupting this person's sleep is their pain, then the message becomes, something like, well, pain will disrupt your sleep. There is nothing in particular you can do to like boost your sleep or improve your sleep when pain is the only reason that's disrupting it. You have to like work on the pain to minimize that, and then you'll sleep better as a consequence. However, you very often have this scenario where somebody says, I have so much pain. Okay, what happens? Well, I wake up and then I don't immediately feel pain, but then I sense it's there, and then I'm up for like 2 hours and struggling. And then you're like, okay, tell me more. Well, then I eventually fall back asleep, but I wake up and then I'm up for another 2 hours, and I've tried melatonin, I've tried the night blinds, I've tried this, I've tried that, but nothing helps. Now you can tell that there's more than pain going on here. The pain may be part of the picture, but the reaction to waking up, the reaction to like their relationship with sleep, trying to get sleep, being confused, etc., that is truly why they're struggling. So when that is the case, then I'm like, okay, we have a lot we can work on. So when that's the case, then it becomes, then that person has insomnia. Then that person is being kept awake by the way they think about being awake at night and their relationship when sleeping. And then that person, I can help a lot getting towards a place where they sleep much better despite having some pain.
Sure. So where do you start going off of that insomnia side? So let's say you've gone through, they're having back issues, but they're able to fall asleep. But then it's, that, like you were saying, it's that time they wake up and they just, before the pain even sets in, they for whatever reason can't get back to sleep. Like, where do you start with that person?
Good question. And this is where the reason there is so much confusion and unhelpful suggestions in the sleep world is that it's from the person who has trouble sleeping, and from me as somebody trying to help, it's you want to provide something kind of pretty easy to do. Try this, right? That's easy for me, and that's easy for the person on the receiving end, but it doesn't really help. And that's where what I'm about to, there's no simple answer. There's no simple answer to that question. But to give you like a good picture of the real answer, it is education. It is understanding why you have trouble sleeping. That is always the key. So where do you start? Where I always start by, okay, we established that you have trouble sleeping, you have insomnia. Now we're going to talk about why you have that, because when you understand why you have so much trouble sleeping, then it becomes very easy to see how you move forward. And there are many ways of explaining to someone why they have insomnia, why they have trouble sleeping. But should I go over like one good way of looking at it, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, please.
Perfect. So this is gonna take maybe like 3 minutes or 4 minutes there, but I think this is super important for anyone out there that struggles with insomnia. I want to explain why insomnia happens. Okay, so where we need to start is actually talking a little bit about like how the mind works, and basically this is kind of the foundation. Is the brain is a survival machine. So is the body, by the way. Every part of our body is there for survival, right? Like, why do we have legs? To run. Why do we have a nose? To smell things. Like, that's for survival. That's good. Those are good things to have. The brain's the same. Everything that the brain does is for survival. So we have kind of our core emotions like happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, right? They are there for a practical reason to keep us safe. The reason you sometimes become angry is because sometimes you need to defend yourself, right? The reason you become fearful is sometimes you need to hide. The reason you're happy is you need to go out and do things proactively to survive, right? Perfect. So if you are faced with a real, tangible, physical threat, let's say you're being charged at by a grizzly bear, that is when the brain is in its zone. It's like the perfect thing for the brain, It's like fear, fight, or flight. That's it. Either you're going to scare away this grizzly bear or you're going to hide. Either way, perfect. Survival. You're going to do great. Okay? Now, here's the thing. The brain can become confused, particularly in 2021, when there aren't that many real, tangible physical threats out there. So one thing that often pops up on the radar as a threat, but it is not a threat, it's a perceived threat, is, guess what? Being awake at night. Now, when you hear that the first time, it sounds like, what are you talking about? Well, guess what? When you have insomnia, that means you can't sleep, right? Which means that you're awake at night And you don't want to have that. You're scared of it. You're like, why is this happening? You're confused. What's happened at some point in your journey is that your brain has started to look at wakefulness, being awake at night, as a threat. And what happens then? Well, guess what? To the brain, a threat is always a threat. It does the same thing for every single threat. It goes into like fight or flight, survival, right? But here's the problem. You cannot outrun wakefulness. You can't fight it. You can't destroy it. You can't get away from it. And so when that happens, when you try to, let's say, you pop some melatonin, nothing happened. You install night blinds, nothing happens. You go to bed earlier, nothing happens. It seems like, oh my God, this is a real big threat. Nothing I do works. And the brain goes into stronger fight or flight. And you try more things, and the threat becomes even bigger. Now you have insomnia. So this is it. So pain, for example, can be the thing that wakes you up initially and disrupts your sleep. But when you have this ongoing struggle, it is because the brain has started to look at being awake at night as a threat that it has to like deal with. And the more it tries to fight it, the worse things get. So last thing here in this analogy, now you understand this, you can see that the key towards sleeping better again is what I like to call befriending wakefulness. Start looking at being awake, even if it's at night, not as a threat or a problem, but as acceptable. Turn an asset, a liability to an asset, turn a foe into a friend, starting to become more okay with it. And when that happens, when the brain no longer looks at this as a threat or a problem, sleep comes your way. You start sleeping better and better and better. The end.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole time I was like, wow, this is an excellent explanation of this. And there are so many parallels with actually dealing with chronic and persistent pain. We talk about a lot in this group about how powerful our brain is, and not to say, because the first thing that people think of when you say, well, the brain and pain is like, oh, pain, I'm just making this up. That's not true at all. Pain is always a real experience, and our brain is a powerful physiological machine that controls everything. So yeah, there are so many parallels with that, and I find that the same thing with pain. When people truly they look at it and they can almost be, yeah, like you said, almost befriend it, and then instead of viewing it as this existential threat, more so, okay, my body's trying to tell me something. How do I cope with that? Things start to get a little bit easier. And like you said, it takes work.
It takes a lot of work.
It does. It's not easy. So, I think that's a huge message for our listeners today too, is that like this stuff takes work. And it's important to have people in your corner, whether it's your physician, your physical therapist, your other healthcare provider, and also your family to help support you. So step one is more of that, that befriending and not viewing wakefulness as a threat necessarily. So once people have, do you find that, how long, I know this is a really hard question. How long? It's of course different for everyone, but let's say that on average, like if somebody puts in the work and they are able to kind of rethink of, okay, this pain or this sleep, this wakefulness is not an awful thing. Once they work through that, how long until they usually start to see some sort of result? Is it a week, 2 weeks, a year? Is there a range typically?
Good question, and you're right. Of course, the journey is different from everyone, but there is, it's not a process that takes years for sure. It's not that. It's something more like, if someone doesn't have that much trouble sleeping, meaning it's not a strong threat in their belief system. It's kind of like they have they have a little bit of trouble sleeping here. It could be as little as like 2 weeks. I can see people back in 2 weeks and they're like, you know what? I totally get it. I sleep great now. I totally understand. Somebody who has, had a long time with trouble sleeping, a lot of entrenched ideas, it can take maybe like 3 months or something like that. But that's kind of the span. It can take a little 2 weeks and maybe typically not more than like 2-3 months, something like that.
And these are and the big qualifier is like doing the, like actually going through the steps and putting the, I don't want to say necessarily work. That kind of sounds like a, I don't know if that's a helpful way to look at sleep. But taking the steps, this is assuming people are like putting what they're learning into action, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to share something with you. Actually, that just came to me. I think it was yesterday. I I thought about these kind of steps from like having a lot of trouble sleeping to sleeping well, and we can go over those really quickly. I think that will give everybody a really good idea of what it's like. So like if you're in step 0, like you're in a baseline, for example, like the quote unquote the most unhelpful place to be in, if I put it that way, is complete and utter bewilderment. You have no clue why you can't sleep, and you're just grasping at straws, and you don't even think that it's related to how you feel. You're like, I'm not scared at all. I just don't sleep at all. I'm completely puzzled. That's kind of like step 0. Step 1 is understanding that insomnia is a type of anxiety. I am scared. When somebody says like, I'm so scared, I can't sleep, I'm super anxious, I'm like, good. You come to step 1. You know that your insomnia comes from fear. You're in a much better place. Okay. Yeah. Step 2 is understanding that your insomnia is the same as everybody else's. You are unique. Your journey is unique, but your insomnia is the same as everybody else's. There's nothing unusual with your insomnia. That's kind of step 2. Step 3 is understanding a little bit of sleep physiology. You understand that the only thing that can make you sleep is your body needing to sleep, being sleepy. No potion, soothing sound, meditation, nothing of that can make you sleep. Only your own body can make you sleep. Anxiety can stand in the way, but only your body can. That's kind of like step 3. And then when you come to the next step, which is understanding that it is your desire for sleep. The more you want it, the more you crave it, the more trouble you get. When you've gotten to those steps, like step 4, that is like you have a foundation. Now you have a foundation. Now you understand the whole thing. And that part, like from 0 to 4, that is work. That is work. That is thought work. That is understanding, learning, being willing to intake in information. That is work for sure. Now, the last 3 steps are completely passive. Those are the gift of all the work you did. And so step 5 is being less anxious. You understand everything, and you're like, and this is a very common one, like, okay, I totally get it, Daniel. I'm not so anxious about sleep anymore, but I don't sleep any better. And then I'm like, good, because sleep is going to come. That's the next step. You've done all the work. You're less anxious. Perfect. And so step 6 here is sleeping better, which is wonderful. You already gotten so far, right? And then what can happen though is this one, that I sleep better. I'm still so tired. I'm like, okay, no problem. It's because you've been hyper aroused, you're being anxious, and it's kind of like, imagine you're in a basketball game and you're like playing, your adrenaline's flowing, you're up and doing this thing, and somebody asks you, are you tired? No, I'm not tired. I'm doing this thing. Same thing with insomnia. Like, you're so hyper aroused, you don't feel the fatigue. So the last step is like when the hyper arousal and anxiety goes away, you sleep better, but you feel so tired because it was unmasked, that fatigue. So where am I now? Step 7 is like you actually feel less fatigue, and step 8 is like you're good for the rest of your life. So the point here is like, that's kind of the journey, and the first steps are work, and the last 3 steps are passive. And to be honest with you, for a lot of people, those last 3 steps are the most challenging ones, because you understand everything, but you can't let go. Your brain's telling you, you got to do something to sleep more, and you got to be like, no, I don't. I got to let go. I got to let go control. But that is the journey.
Huh. Man, so many parallels. Yeah, I mean that's huge. I think you said the last 3 steps are like step 6, 7, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, 5, 7. Yeah.
Step 5, where you don't necessarily have the anxiety about it, but it still is there, right? And I find that's similar to with like back pain too. I have plenty of people I work with who get to a point where they're like, I'm not really afraid of it anymore, but it's still here. And that's kind of would you say that for sleep, that's also a pivotal moment of, whether they can decide to continue or whether to go a different direction, like medication, or like how do you like, do you find that people diverge there, or do they diverge somewhere else typically?
I think, that is absolutely pivotal. No question about it. If somebody goes the route of like medication, supplement, outside things, they have a long journey ahead of them.
Mm.
No judgments. I don't, no judgment to anyone out there. I understand that, but that is going to be a long journey. It's going to be the journey towards confusion and frustration. And if you stay the path, good things are going to come your way for sure. But if you ask me, like, when does that thing happen? I want to say that, to be honest with you, if people have gotten already to like the first couple of stages when they kind of understand it, when people understand, okay, I get it. I understand why I'm not sleeping. It is my desire for sleep that's triggering. Usually when they've gotten to that point, they don't go the medication route. So the pivotal moment, I think, is actually earlier when it comes to sleep.
Okay. Is there a place for medications with sleep?
I say no, absolutely not, to be honest with you. I want to say this. Okay, now I'm going to share a quick little anecdote here, what I think is a really helpful one, though. It is, okay, for many people, of course, you start having trouble for some random reason, and then it goes into that like ongoing problem. And we already talked about why, right?
Sure.
But still to this day, like most people, we have all this kind of information around us, right? But most people still look to their doctor as like the person they talk to first when they have trouble sleeping.
Sure.
And they should. And the unfortunate thing is that doctors don't know anything because they're not educated. But people do the right thing. They talk to the doctor, right? And then the doctor goes, okay, you got insomnia, and maybe try some sleep hygiene, which of course doesn't work. That does not work at all. And then the patient gets more frustrated, but comes back and says, that didn't work. And the doctor's like, okay, what can we do? Here's a prescription, right? And in that moment, a couple of really unhelpful things happen. One, the doctor has confirmed what the person thought, that, yeah, there's something wrong with me. I'm not like other people. I have this thing called insomnia. Number two, by, the implicit message when somebody gets the prescription is, yeah, I can't sleep on my own. I need this thing to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And now we have this pivot, and now kind of one of these other pivotal moments, which is like, okay, person takes this thing and they sleep no better, right?
Right.
That is the path of frustration. That is the path of like, nothing works. I got to try this other thing. Nothing works. And that's not helpful at all. Frustration does not make you sleep well, right? And then we have the other path, which is worse, which is somebody takes this thing and then they start sleeping more. You think that's good, right? But it is not, because that person's confidence, their sleep confidence, their belief in their own ability to sleep has become crushed now. They think something's wrong with me. I can't sleep on my own and I need this thing to sleep. And their sleep confidence is like shattered. And, because after a while, when their belief in this thing that makes them sleep kind of when they become skeptical, like, is this really making me sleep? Then it no longer works. And then they're like in a really, really poor place. So that's the long way of saying no medication, supplements, anything from the outside, no good.
Yeah. And, it seems like with a lot of medications for a lot of different things, you take them and then you have to keep taking more and more and more until you reach this dosage that is just insane. And then still people probably struggle, like you're saying, with sleep. I've had people who are taking obscene amounts of gabapentin and oxycodone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you standing? And they still have severe amounts of pain. And yeah, just to your point, I think there is that pivotal moment where like somebody comes in, they're having trouble sleeping, and okay, does their provider who they're working with, do they understand sleep? Are they going to recommend a certain sleep, certain like coaching for them, or are they going to go the medication route? I think that's really important. So for everyone listening, like that's very, very crucial.
It is very important. And what happens is that often, like, when you have trouble sleeping, or I'm sure pain too, like of course you want to do something about it, and you want something to work. and you want a medication to work, right? So often you have this belief in it, you kind of externalize confidence, and you take something and you sleep better, feels good, like, yeah, I got some control, good, this is working. And then you become skeptical. But then instead of, like, when you're not sleeping, you're taking this medication, but you're now again not sleeping, the brain doesn't go into place of saying, oh, that means it never actually worked. It never actually did anything. So I should stop taking it. It goes, it helped for a while, but now it stopped working. So I still need it, but I need this other thing. And that's the reason you get piled on more and more things, you know.
Right. And then you probably have to unpack all of that when they eventually come and work with you.
100%. Like, that's the thing. By the time I interact with people, unfortunately, you have to, like, there's so many layers to peel off, so much untangling to do. So but the problem here again is medical education. I think that is it. Like, we have to, radical change is needed there for sure.
Yeah. And what's happening right now in the world that's moving in the right direction or in the wrong direction?
Yeah, I wish I could say I could point to things that are going the right direction. The only, maybe that thing I mentioned earlier, that the National Sleep Foundation has kind of like widen the recommendation, but there isn't much good going on, I think, now. Well, okay, step back here. I think, okay, there are two ways things can change, right? From the inside or from the outside, meaning, do I see medical education changing from the inside, people realizing that are like these kind of bigwigs and like people with power in the medical community? Will they realize that there's a big problem? We've got to change everything from the bottom up. I don't think that's going to happen. No, but I think people like you and me, you know, like we're out there coaching, we're out there on our YouTube channel, on Instagram, on like educating people. That's where I see hope. That's where I think things can change, kind of like in the alternative side or the coaching space or things like that. I think that's where I see hope.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the reach of a lot of social media, this is the one thing that I think is good that social media is good for. Is bringing accurate health information to people.
It can do that. Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
by the way, I just want to sneak this one in there because it's been on my mind as we've been talking. But one of these, like, I think a real clear parallel from sleep and pain and many other things is kind of like acute chronic. So I think it's very, very obvious for somebody to see that if you hit your hammer real hard, your thumb with the hammer real hard, you feel pain. That there's no like, that's obvious, right? You're gonna feel pain, that and you can see that that is good pain. You know, that's the pain you need to make sure you don't hit your hammer like that again. Same thing with insomnia. You know, you just lost your job and you sleep very little. You can see that that's natural, right? But when somebody has had like like when that thumb is still hurting like 6 weeks later because you heard it like 6 weeks ago, it's like, that is a little bit odd. And that's when kind of like the pain has taken a life of its own, the sleep insomnia is taking a life of its own. It is now no longer driven by the initial insult. It is driven by how you think about it, right? I think that's a very, very similar thing between like pain and insomnia.
Sure. And this might be getting into the weeds a little bit for our listeners, but um, is there any evidence to show that there is a central sensitizing effect of insomnia where there are actual um, like new neural connections being made um, when people struggle with insomnia for a long time? And just to give you an example, like with chronic pain, for example, like the hammer example. So you hit your thumb with the hammer, it's swollen and painful and everything, and then 3 months later it should be fine. There's no damage to the tissue, it's all healed, but it's still sensitized because that peripheral tissue, those nerve endings, for whatever reason, your body is still viewing it as a threat. And you're getting this, the descending inhibition from the brain is not working as well as it should. Does that also happen with insomnia? Is there an objective, measurable change that we can see in that?
I think in terms of like the objectiveness here, if there's studies to show something similar with insomnia, I've never come across anything like that, and I think it would be maybe hard to study. I don't know, but from kind of like my personal like observational thinking here, I have no question whatsoever that that does happen if you ask somebody that has no trouble sleeping whatsoever, like, what do you think, like, how bad would it be if you didn't sleep at all tomorrow? That person would be like, wow, that'd probably be the suck, but it's okay. If you ask somebody who's had trouble sleeping, like, how bad would it be if you didn't sleep at all tomorrow? That is very triggering. That is like, not sleep at all. I can't have that. I don't want to experience that. And that kind of shows you that there is that kind of sensitization there for sure.
Yeah, and sorry to put you on the spot. That's
Not at all. I love
really
it.
unanswerable question, but I see the parallel though potentially too. So it looks like we've got a couple questions here. I wanted to address these. Be cool to go into some questions from the audience.
Absolutely.
Cool. So one person asked, I don't have the name here in front of me, but I think, let me see. So Rebecca asked, what about depression and pain? So like what are the and I know we're kind of talking about sleep, but sleep influences depression, depression influences sleep. So you can take this any direction that you'd like to go.
100%. I want to say there's almost nobody that I work with that has insomnia that doesn't have anxiety. Like they almost always have the same, that those two, right? And many, if not most, but at least many also have depression, right? And I very often get the question like, is my insomnia causing my depression? Is my depression causing my insomnia? Is this causing that? And I think my thinking is this, that it's not that one is causing the other, it's that they all come from the same place. Meaning, going back to what we talked about very earlier about like these kind of human emotions we have, there's, we have sadness, we have fear, we have anger. Those are complete normal parts of the human experience, right?
Sure.
And when it comes to insomnia, what happens is that the brain starts looking at being awake at night as a threat. It's not a real threat, it's a perceived threat. When you fight it, everything gets worse, right? But wakefulness is not the only thing that the human brain can start looking at as a threat. Weirdly, our own human emotions can become identified as threats, okay? So when, for example, anger becomes identified as a threat, like I'm angry all the time. Why am I angry? Why can't I get less angry? I have to do this to become less angry. And then you get into the same loop. You're trying to escape anger. You're trying to avoid anger. You don't want anger. And that puts more focus on it. And you become more angry. And you're just in this kind of anger loop, okay? If the emotion of anxiety becomes the thing you try to avoid and escape and you don't want to have, then we're in the same loop with anxiety. Like the more you try to escape it, the more it looks like a real threat, the more anxiety you have, the more you try to escape it, the more anxiety you have. So that's the anxiety loop. If being sad becomes the thing that your brain identifies as, this is the threat, this is the thing I want to go away for, I can't be sad, it's unacceptable, I don't want to have sadness, then you're in the sadness loop, then you get depression. So they all these things come from a place of avoidance. The more you try to avoid something that is part of the human experience, like the emotion of sadness, like the emotion of anxiety, like the emotion of anger, like wakefulness, the more trouble you have. So they all come from the same place. And the way I say, when I have patients that ask me this question or clients, I tell them, I'm not an anxiety specialist or a depression specialist, but what I will teach you about insomnia applies to all of this. So you can take my teaching and apply them to depression, for example, and you'll do really well with that.
Yeah, that's really. I hope that's really encouraging for a lot of others to hear too, and hopefully a good just framework to look at it from. Because like you said, I think there are, as I'm in practice longer, I notice that there are these almost universal principles that apply to not only sleep, not only pain, but to relationships, to our work, to even our hobbies. Avoidance. right? I mean, this avoidance of the uncomfortable, when we allow it to continue to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, it can turn into the insomnia or the anxiety or depression or persistent pain issues. So I think, yeah, I mean, absolutely, what you're saying is, yeah, on the money. Much more eloquent than I could say it.
No, I think maybe you put it better. Actually, I think it was very clear the way you put it, and I think again, yeah, just echoing that is the like there's discomfort in the human experience, and the more we try to avoid that discomfort, the more sticky it becomes.
100%. 100%. So another person here, looks like Kelly asked, but how do you get to the point of sleep and overcoming the anxiety? Can you overcome anxiety? How does is that a healthy way to look at it?
Yeah, I think you probably already know where I'm going, what I'm going to answer. But I can tell it by the way you answer the question. So, when somebody asks me that, okay, so going back to kind of the narrative again, very, very quickly, the narrative that is feeding your insomnia is that there is this threat, like you can't be awake at night, you have to fight it. And that's where that narrative is why that terminology is used so much when we talk about sleep. It's a battle. My bed has become a battlefield. I'm struggling, I'm fighting it. I have to find a way to crush it, and one of the most common words is overcome. It's the same thing. I have to overcome this thing.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, like the more you try to fight it, the stickier it becomes. It is when you abandon the struggle that sleep will come your way. I know it's not easy to conceptualize, but a good example I have is, that was kind of a little bit different example, but oftentimes it seems like this riddle, like this, I have to get to the bottom, I have to figure it out, but it's like an existential question sometimes, like how big is the universe? You can spend your entire life trying to figure it out, but we've all of us have gotten to a point where we probably I can't figure it out. I have to abandon that. And when you abandon it, like you can actually live a good life even without getting to the root of it. So a little bit of that, like when you abandon the fight, abandon the struggle, abandon the investigation, sleep comes your way.
Yeah, man. I call that not giving into the rabbit hole. And then I saw I forget what I was listening to recently, but they were talking about this math equation and how there's this infinite loop, and it became a meme. And so I think now, okay, like more injections, more medication, more. You're on an infinite loop. There is an exit, but right now you're on an infinite loop, and it doesn't lead to a place that you're going to enjoy. And the same thing applies for sleep.
100%. And I think there may be more questions, but I think one thing I felt like I haven't really shared here is kind of more practical things. Like, okay, we've talked very big picture, which is super important. But for somebody out there struggling with sleep, okay, what are some more practical things you can do? Well, here's the thing. Most people that have trouble sleeping, of course, like want to get more sleep. And the classic thing that you hear is somebody's like, I go to bed like 10, but I don't fall asleep until midnight. Then I wake up at 4, I'm up 3 times. And then I get out of bed at 7. And then I sleep, I try to sleep at 5. So when you get this story, you realize like, oh, this person is giving themselves a 9-hour opportunity for sleep between 10 p.m. and 7, for example, but they're only sleeping like 6 hours or 5 or something like that. And they're struggling a lot. So a real practical thing is, and this sounds weird, but it's very helpful. It is give yourself less of an opportunity for sleep. Okay. So if you now give yourself 9 hours, give yourself 7 hours, say I'm going to be up at 6, but I'm not going to go to bed before 7. I'm going to stay up later. So I have that sleep drive. I'm more sleepy, but more importantly, it's a very psychologically important step away from the fight and the struggle. Okay. I'm going to give myself less opportunity to sleep. It's like I'm letting go. I'm not trying as much. Super helpful. Give yourself less of an opportunity for sleep. Really, really helpful. And number 2, I've talked about like befriending wakefulness, make that more acceptable to you. How do you do that practically? Well, when it is that time before you go to bed, a lot of people go like, okay, I'm gonna shut everything down, keep the noise level cool, etc. Like you're trying to avoid wakefulness, which is not helpful. So how do you befriend it? Watch some Netflix. It's not complicated. Do something you enjoy before you go to bed. Like make wakefulness, have fun.
What about the blue light?
The blue light. The blue light it's a total myth. There's nothing there. The blue light is totally fine. Your screen is fine.
Nice.
That's not the problem. It's your fear is the problem. And when you do something you enjoy, when you look forward to that time before going to bed, super helpful. And last thing here, the same thing oddly applies when you're awake at night. If you wake up at 4 a.m., don't know that it's 4 a.m. Okay, so don't tell me I woke up at 4 a.m. It's better to not know. Another powerful act of letting go of control. Don't know the time. But that said, when you wake up, it's the middle of the night. Don't be like, I gotta sleep more. I gotta do the thing to sleep. Be like, okay, cool. I'm awake. I'm not gonna fight that. I'm awake. I accept that. I'm now gonna enjoy this podcast. I'm now gonna enjoy this book. And last thing here, a lot of people are like, oh, so I'm gonna, okay, I got it. I have this really boring book I'm gonna read. No, now you're fighting it again. Pick a good book. Make wakefulness your friend, and sleep will come your way.
That is so encouraging, honestly. I mean, to actually, like, instead of fighting against it, put some things you enjoy in there. A podcast you actually like, a book you actually enjoy. So or a Netflix show that you enjoy. If you wake up in the middle of the night, like, make it a positive association versus a negative association.
Super important. And now I bet people that at least a couple of people who hear this are going to be like, well, isn't that going to make me more awake?
Right.
And then the question, obviously, I love that one, because then I'm like, exactly. Now you're just shown you are afraid of being awake, which is the reason you can't sleep, So again, that becomes a really good teaching point. Okay, isn't that going to make me more awake? Yeah, maybe. But that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the way.
Huh. Blowing my mind. Blowing my mind. Honestly, sometimes I will wake up and I do some of the things that you are pointing out. Like, I'll look at my phone. I'm like, it's 4:30 a.m. I wanted to sleep for like another hour. I mean, I go back to sleep, but it's like that. You're still checking to see, like, did I do good? Did I do a good job? That's interesting. Huh.
No, it is. And I think, out of all, when I talk to people that have gone to have a lot of trouble sleeping, to like sleeping well, like, and ask them, so how do you what was the most important lesson for you? Like, the number one is, and this sounds really weird when you have trouble sleeping, but number one is like, I just don't care so much anymore. And which is not actually the case. It's everybody cares, including that person, but they have become less attached. They have gotten to a place where if they don't sleep or they sleep a lot, both are okay. There's no more fight and struggle. They sleep really good. But another one is like, and this is where, why I thought about this was, another very common one is when people realize, I can sleep very little one night and I can still have an okay day. It's not 100% predicated upon how much I sleep. And that really reduces the pressure. When people get to that point, that really takes away pressure to sleep. So even, you check your time, it's like 4, because what a lot of people do is like, they check, oh, I only slept 4.5 hours. Dang it, I'm gonna be so tired. They spend all day thinking about it, and that thinking about it makes them tired. So again, if you don't have the pressure to perform, like, things get better.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, now with all of these wearables too, it's probably like, I'm guilty. Like, I have one. And, I don't know how accurate the sleep tracker is on it, but I will be honest that before I read your book, I was looking at it. I was like, did I sleep 8 hours? Did I sleep 8 hours? And even if I felt amazing, like, even if I got 6.5 hours of sleep and I felt like a champ, I was still looking like, oh, but I didn't get 8. I'll probably be tired tomorrow. It's weird.
The trackers are a huge problem in the sleep world for sure. But again, kind of like hammering in this teaching point, I'm going to say something that often shocks people when I say it the first time, which is like, sleeping X amount of hours has no inherent value. It has no inherent value. It's like money. It's a piece of paper with something on it. It has no inherent value. The value comes from what you can trade it for. If you sleep this amount and you feel great, that's it. There's no inherent value in sleeping more. It's all about, if you feel good, you got what you needed.
Yeah. So one question to follow up on that, and then maybe there's one more question here. I think we have time for like two more. But what about, all, and you're probably going to blow these out of the water, but um, what about like if somebody is chronically sleeping like 4 hours per night, or on the flip side, like 10 hours a night, right? Are there studies to show that at the very extremes that is inherently unhealthy, or is it still unclear?
Good question, and kind of a little bit longer answer here, maybe. There's no evidence that short sleep for a long time or long sleep for a long time causes any health problem whatsoever. That has never been shown. It's actually impossible to show that, because how would you do that? How can you make somebody a chronic short sleeper in experimental studies? So you can't prove it, but there has been a lot of observational studies, okay, where you take a cohort of people and you look at, okay, those who reported sleeping little or reported sleeping a lot, how did they do over time? And there's kind of this Nike-shaped relationship between reported sleep duration and health outcomes. So what you see is that people that report sleeping more than 7 hours, 7.5, 8, 9, 10, they have worse health outcomes. And people who report sleeping less than 4 hours have worse health outcomes. But that doesn't show causality. It doesn't mean that one thing caused another. I think personally that the reason for that is that when you have health problems, let's say you have diabetes, you have congestive heart failure, you have some other disease, you're not going to sleep well. You are not going to sleep well. You're either going to have like a lot of problems sleeping and you're going to estimate sleeping very little, or you're going to feel so tired that you estimate sleeping a lot. You're going to fall out into those in the periphery. And then it will look like, that will explain the correlation, if you will. And last thing on this topic is what is much, much more strongly related to poor health outcome is long sleep, which I don't think is a causal. I don't think it's the sleep that has anything to do with it. But I just bring that up to highlight that you never hear about that. You never hear about that in media, because that doesn't make people anxious or scared or gets your eyeballs. You always hear like short sleep is the problem, but
Right.
you never hear that long sleep. I just bring that out to highlight that media is skewed towards making you scared.
Sure. Yeah, that's huge. I'm in complete agreement with you. You should see some of the stuff about pain. It blows my mind. But like, put me on the Today Show. Come on, put you onto the Today Show. All together. So what would be like, say, the key 2 or 3 takeaways for people today that they can take and think about or implement?
Very well. So I want to say, number one, let's highlight the one we've talked about quite a bit, which is that short sleep and insomnia has never been shown to cause any health problems whatsoever. And why do I say that? Is sometimes people are confused. Like, you're a sleep doctor. Why are you kind of emphasizing how sleep isn't that important? Well, it is because that is what gives people, allows people to sleep, and when you sleep well, everything is better. Okay. So that's number one. Okay. Nothing to worry about, really, truly. Number two, it is no matter how, like, if you're struggling with sleep, if it takes you hours to fall asleep, you're up for hours at night, you're confused, that comes from an anxiety. It is a fear. And I say that because you don't want to go into the rabbit hole of like trying to figure out why it's going on. It is your fear causing it. It's basically like the most fundamental truth in sleep is the more you try, the less you get. That's super, super important. So I guess that's number two. Like, insomnia is a type of anxiety. It comes from fear. I say that's number two. And number three, I'm just going to repeat befriending wakefulness. Like, if wakefulness even in the night becomes acceptable to you, you will sleep better than you ever thought possible.
Yeah. Wow. This has been awesome. I mean, I have like literally 1,000 more questions. have a patient coming in too. So, so we'll have to set up another time. But what is the best way that people can follow you and follow your work?
Absolutely. I think definitely it's YouTube. You can search my name, Daniel Erichsen, or the name of my channel is called The Sleep Coach School. But you'll find me on, I'm fairly active on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So those are other places you can find me.
Awesome. Cool. And then they can find your books on Amazon as well, right?
Absolutely. And I want to say, I know you read this one just briefly, which is great if you're like worried about your sleep. It's a super short one. And I put it at the lowest price Amazon would allow me because I just want to spread that word. This one, if you want to learn more about like insomnia and you know, kind of more about the philosophy that I'm talking about here, that Set It and Forget It is a good one.
Cool. So set it and forget it, and then why we don't sleep.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, and check it. And everyone, if you're still in here or catching on the replay, make sure to follow Dr. Daniel Erichsen on YouTube. You can type in his name or go to the Sleep Coach School. He's got tons of resources in there. And do you typically interact with people, comments, messages, everything too?
I was just going to say that exactly. Like I answer comments very quickly, and we do many, like three times per week. We have this Q&A type show, so people can email a question, and then we answer it on the channel. So definitely reach out if you have any sleep questions.
Awesome, cool. So I'll put all in the show notes. I'll put your email, YouTube, all that other stuff, and make sure that people have that so they can reach out to you if they need help.
Sounds really, really good. And last thing I want to say here is just like speaking to you and our friend Adam. It's kind of funny to me how the people I've connected the most with, honestly, outside of sleep, is physical therapists that are dealing with pain. It's like so much parallel there for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's the physical therapists and occupational therapists. There's a subset of us that, and in the education now, that have taken on this biopsychosocial approach, where we now recognize we've known this for decades, but it's finally getting into practice where pain is much more complex than just the hammer on the thumb, right? It involves how we deal with stress. It involves our relationships. It involves sleep. It involves all these different types of things. So, I think as you and I both continue on this journey, we're going to continue to interact with a lot of different providers, and hopefully, my physician friends hop on the bandwagon soon too. So, we need more of our primary care providers doing this as well.
I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
Me too. Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Dr. Erichsen. We need to do this again, but until next time, man, thanks.
Anytime. It was super fun.
Cool.